Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Trijicon RCR at 10,000 rounds. In the grand scheme of things, 10,000 rounds is not a lot of use for, a lot of rounds fired for a gun that's going to be used quite often. Competition, personal carry, defense, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to get there. However, it is kind of a benchmark, and if you guys watched my review, my initial review on the RCR, I did have some initial hesitation about the mounting system for the RCR. And there's some other advantages to it as an evolution from the RMR, which we'll talk about. But that is usually the biggest sticking point I hear come up when people ask me how I feel about the RCR. And as you guys know, my review process is 2,000 rounds, which does include a drop test every 500 rounds. That's usually the biggest thing people focus on, but there's also slide manipulations, general use, recoil, and the overall rough and tumble that an optic is going to encounter when being used, and usually it's going to take a little bit more hard use in a duty setting, and that's why my testing regimen is for a duty optic. For concealed carry, it's, I wouldn't say overkill, but it's definitely enthusiastically greater than what a normal CCW optic can expect to encounter. The Capstan system is a departure from our traditional screws. So I had that initial concern. Is this system going to provide consistent mounting for an optic? Am I going to have adjustment problems? Is installation going to be a problem? Is compatibility going to be a problem? And those are all very real concerns, and this is a risk that companies take when they do get away from what's traditionally done, especially when it comes to optic mounting. Back in the dark ages of pistol optics, the RMR was the go-to choice. It was my go-to choice because it was the only optic that could easily, consistently, and repeatably survive the rigors of my testing process. So it became my mule. Sometimes I'm not reviewing an optic, I'm reviewing a mounting system. Just recently completed a 2,000 round rundown on this Alpha Foxtrot Romulus, and mounted on top of it is my original RCR, the very first one I got. And this brings us to 10,000 rounds. Now this optic has been through it, and it has also become my mule, meaning I use it to review optic footprints, because I know it's going to be a consistent, well, optic. It's going to return to zero, it's going to hold zero. If there's an issue, it's probably going to be the plate system, not the optic. And it's I guess another way to put it is, it's a known quantity. What I discovered really quickly about the Capstan system is I like it more, even though it is a little bit more difficult to mount, I like it more than a traditional top-down screw system. And of course they went to this system so they could maintain the RMR footprint, which is really smart. They gave us an enclosed optic with a very good size window. It's also an elevated window. So, and this is subjective, but it does make dot presentation easier to acquire for more novice shooters as they build their skill set. But really about the Capstan, I'm able to deliver a lot of torque on these screws, and I don't have a significant or even partial risk of stripping those screws during mounting or removal. So not only on this gun, but on multiple guns that I've used the RCR on, I'm mounting it and I'm just kind of forgetting about it. I'm not having to constantly check witness marks, although they are there. And this isn't obviously recommended by the manufacturer, but I use red Loctite, just a little bit of red Loctite, because the way I figure it, the only way that time this optic is ever going to come off the gun is if there's something specifically wrong with the optic. And after having dropped this thing multiple times on drop testings, the initial drop testing, but also using it to review other optic footprints, or I'm sorry, other guns' optic footprints. Like, for example, the Romulus system. Is that going to be a good optic plate, a good optic footprint from that manufacturer, from that brand? Also, the Voodoo Priest, is that going to be good? Other guns that I've tested it on. Being a known quantity, the only time the optic is coming off the gun is it's being moved to another gun. Now, when I put it on guns that I'm not using for reviews, I teach quite a bit and I travel. And especially for teaching like red dot handgun instructor, I bring multiple guns and I will end up teaching with the gun that's the most common gun in the class. So if I show up to a class and it's mostly Glocks, the Glock 34 is coming out the box. If I show up to a class and it's kind of a mix, or there's a lot of FN products in the class, I'll bring out my FN 509F. If it's 2011 heavy, then the Staccato is coming out of the box, or one of my other 2011s that has an RCR on it. And that's going to be the gun that I teach with. And that kind of knocks the round count up pretty quick too, because during classes, a 3-day class, I'll shoot 500 rounds just doing demonstrations of concept, principle, skills, or drills that we're doing during the class. So my sample size is much greater than 1 at this point. I'm using the RCR on multiple guns. I'm using it not only on handguns, but it also fits a very good role, kind of replacing all the RMRs that I had acquired over the years that serve as backup sighting systems or sighting systems for things like shotguns. Because it's already got an RMR footprint and I've already got all this time and money invested in that platform, I throw the RCR on there and it becomes my offset 45. And I'm using that on 308s, 300 Win Mag, 5.56, depending on the rifle platform. And then throwing it on 12 gauge, both pump action and semi-auto. It's a good window size, virtually the same for me as it is on the RMR, and it easily replaces that. The only difference you notice when going from the RMR to the RCR is you now have an enclosed optic, which is a huge plus, especially for duty carry, because now stuff can't get inside the optic and get inside your emitter. Another big advantage is that slight elevation that the RCR's body has does make presentation a lot cleaner, especially on guns with more of a extreme cheek weld need like a shotgun. And it fills an easy role as being the piggyback optic or the top 12 o'clock mounted optic on my ACOGs, because I'm still a big ACOG believer, especially when setting up a very easy turnkey patrol rifle system. ACOG gives us that fixed magnification. Some people have gotten away from it in favor of variable magnification optics, and that's great. I personally would much rather have a 1 power and then immediately go to max mag. On my 1 to 4s, 1 to 6s, 1 to 8s, 1 to 10s, whatever, I don't spend a lot of time stopping somewhere in the middle of that magnification availability. I usually go from the 1 power to the full power. Exceptions, of course, would be on scopes that go from like 2.5 to 10 or 4 to 25. That's kind of a different conversation. But on those rifles, I would still be more than happy to throw an RCR on there. The consistent performance throughout the 10,000 rounds, I haven't identified any issues. I haven't had any flickering, any fading, any battery control issues. Light transmission is good. In fact, to me, it's the same as I was getting from the RMR. And this really comes into play when people start talking about passive aiming, which is a small but very critical skill. If I need to passively aim through an optic with my night vision. Some optics tout their night vision settings, which are important. I have always had more of a law enforcement mindset when it comes to passive aiming. I'm not going to use night vision settings because I might have to rapidly transition from a night vision to a white light situation, which means I don't want to flip my nods up or raise my head to look underneath them, turn on a white weapon light, and then have to bump my optic brightness up. So it's not something I do, but it's something that others do. If you're using binocular night vision like 15s or 31s, it's a non-issue. There's definitely enough light coming through there. The light transmission for night vision use is great. And if you're having some blooming issues with your dot, you just activate an IR light, it polarizes downrange, and you're good to go. Because this optic has become my go-to optic, for especially on my teaching handguns, but also on my not only my LE teaching handguns, but also just on teaching handguns in general, it checks all the boxes. It does not have some of the cool features that we get from the RMR HD, such as the optional reticle and the auto-adjust light sensing. I appreciate those features, but I personally don't need them. I think they're fantastic, and I think they have a great use, but me personally, I don't need them, so it's not something I'm going to pursue. Now, if they release the RCR with those features, fantastic, because now I'm getting the best of both worlds. But I've got positive adjustments, negative adjustments. I can bring the brightness up, bring the brightness down. I have an enclosed optic. It has an RMR footprint. I'm really checking all the boxes that I personally need, and I don't have to stray away from something that I already knew was going to be rugged and durable. So really what Trijicon did with the RCR that I'm seeing after 10,000 rounds are really hard use, and not just on the original, but I'm also, multiple sample sizes of other RCRs I've used to replace my RMRs. What they've done is they've taken the RCR's durability and they've made it enclosed. And that's it. That's all you really need. The mounting system, and I'll, of course, touch on this again. I have not been able to knock an RCR out of zero on the multiple guns, multiple platforms that I've been using it on when properly installed. So, if the Capstan system is bothersome to you, or if it makes you hesitant or suspicious, I can completely understand that. But I'm telling you personally, As long as it's mounted properly and you apply a good amount of torque and use some good thread locker, you don't have to use red like I do, purple or blue, whatever. It's going to maintain that zero. You're not going to have an issue, and you can witness mark it just like you would with a regular screw, just getting yourself a little paint pen or something like that. So over 10,000 rounds, plus all the rounds I've got on these other platforms, and some of them are getting close to 10,000, but I've got 10,000 on the original. All the drops, all the manipulations, all the shooting, it's boringly reliable. It's exactly what I would expect from a company like Trijicon to produce. I'm very happy with the overall performance. I haven't personally experienced any issues with any of the RCRs I have so far. So, kind of getting into a middle-age life cycle, right? How long should we expect an optic to last? I've got RMRs. I've got 2 RMRs that are over 100,000 rounds. So I'm expecting this RCR is still in its adolescence, and I will give you guys an update as we go through things. And of course, if I do end up breaking it, I'll give you an update on that too, but I really just don't expect that to happen. I feel like it's just going to be as boringly reliable as all the RMRs I've been using over the past decades. And moving forward, we'll see if Trijicon continues to modernize the RCR into what some people want, being auto-adjust, multiple reticle options, things like that. But if you were curious about a more long-term look at the RCR, I think 10,000 rounds is a pretty good benchmark. And as I've been showing you guys, not only the versatility but the durability of the optic, I think that the concern that I shared with you of the Capstan mounting system, and really that's all I ever really heard about, was like, I don't know about that mounting system, and I was completely right there with you in the beginning. Now I would actually like this mounting system to be adopted on other optics. I think it's a fantastic way to apply consistent torque and pressure to the mounting system, but also protect that mounting system and minimize my chances of stripping out screws if I have to remove that optic. So, kind of in summary, I guess, I get asked a lot what my top recommended optic is, and this is more LE focused again, but it's a question that I get from departments, it's a question I get from individual officers. The RCR is my #1 recommended optic. Don't get me wrong, there's other great optics out there, but if you're one of the agencies that got into, if you were ahead of the curve and you were already issuing red dot handguns 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and you already invested in the RMR footprint, now you can just plug and play with the latest generation, which gives you the enclosed option, which adds additional protection from the optic getting blocked by snow or mud or frozen rain or whatever. You're able to maintain that footprint without having to invest in a new footprint. It's going to give you that slightly elevated window, what I consider to be a superior mounting system, and the durability that Trijicon's pretty much known for. And it's really hard for me to not mention that because there's a lot of video evidence of me, well, some people would consider it abuse. A lot of evidence of me abusing Trijicon products over and over and over and over and over and over again. And they just keep working as if they're completely unbothered. And the most damage I've been able to do to 99% of my Trijicon optics has been cosmetic. So that's pretty cool. So if you were curious about a more long-term look at the RCR's performance, I think that checks a box. And I'll be sure to give you guys a video in the future when I get this thing to 50,000 rounds. Till next time, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, train accordingly.